Good morning, everyone. Another few seconds. I think we've got a few more people trickling in. All right, cool. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this mid-year labor law update webinar. This is sponsored by the Monterey County Workforce Development Board today. My name is Anna Manzano, and I am the digital media and event strategist here at California Employers Association. So a couple bits of housekeeping before we get going today. Your audio will be muted throughout the presentation, but we do ask for your participation anyway. If you have questions pertaining to the presentation, you can type them into the Q&A box. It's the two bubbles along the bottom row. Type that at any time and we'll try to address them as we go. Handouts for this presentation were attached to the reminder email where you found the link to this presentation. If you need them resent, please put your email into the chat box and I'll resend them to you as soon as I can. And then most importantly, our survey. Because your feedback is very important to us, please complete the survey by accessing the QR code at the end of the presentation. It'll be on the screen as well as in your handouts. And it really shouldn't take more than a minute to complete, and it does provide us with valuable feedback that we utilize to constantly improve our webinars and really provide you with the best resources. So as I mentioned, today's session is brought to you by the Monterey County Workforce Development Board. And today we have Jerry Hernandez, who is the management analyst, to share more about the resources available to you. Jerry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that. First of all, I want to welcome everyone on the webinar for being here. And I just wanted to share with you that as a workforce board, we have some services that might be of interest to you. We recognize that businesses are at different phases in their development. Some are trying to stabilize themselves given circumstances we all went through, the pandemic, and also individuals trying to reestablish their businesses and get strong. After that phase, we also have, in terms of kind of strengthening, solidifying the business, stabilizing it, and growing it as a third phase. We have certain resources that are available. We have all our services, by the way, are at no cost. Under recruitments, we have job and career fairs that we offer on a routine basis. In fact, we try to do that monthly if possible. We have custom recruitments, and that pertains to larger employers that would like to have a recruitment, and we can have a customized one for you. We have an online job board on our website, and we've had a lot of good participation from the employer community. And then so we also do promotional activities. Under training, we have a program called Incumbent Worker Training. And you have employers that have been with you for 6 or more months. We can help offset your training cost, as well as on-the-job training for those that are looking to go into a job for the first time. And then if you have to lay off individuals, we work with EDD, and there's some resources that are available. The third phase there, column here, resources and other services. We do have micro business grants throughout the year, human resource hotline, which I'll talk about, and then the resources, referrals, individuals that want to start their businesses, and then rapid response. We have a kind of a team that goes out to help employers, again, doing downsizing activities. So those are the services that are available. Next slide is going to show you a calendar that we have of the webinars throughout the year. We've had webinars both online and in person. And I wanted to, obviously here, you're looking at the mid-year labor law update. Our next one is going to be in August, bringing wellness into the workplace, and that's again online. And then in September, top 10 ways to stay out of court. So Anna's going to be able to share some of those links with you, so you'll find out more about that. In our next slide, there's contact information here. So if you do want to contact me, look forward to, you can reach me at 755-5393. And there's my email, as well as then our website address. And our final slide before I turn it back to Anna, this shows you our hotline number. 888-217-6899. If you're an employer that would like some assistance with HR questions, this hotline is for you. You can call multiple times per day and use it throughout the week. And that's a resource that employers have found extremely valuable, particularly those smaller ones. We've also had a number of HR staff that refer to this on an ongoing basis. So I just wanted to share that with you. And again, thank you. And then I'll turn it back to you.
Ooh, lots of resources. Thank you, Jerry. Excuse me. Now I would like to introduce our speaker from the California Employers Association. Today we have Mary Bradford, who is our Human Resources Director. Go ahead, Mary.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, Jerry, and welcome everyone. Really glad to have you with us today to talk all about the labor law update for the middle of the year. So as Jerry mentioned, you have this amazing HR hotline. Make sure you jot that number down, the 888-217-6899, because that's the number you want to call anytime you have any HR related questions. If you have follow-up questions for things that I chat about today, if you just have a question that comes up later on, give us a ring. We are always very happy to help you. Let me give you a quick introduction into CEA. We are the California Employers Association, and we partner with Monterey County to provide this HR hotline to you. And our job is to try to make your job a little easier. And we want to do that by providing peace of mind and helping you figure out all of these wild California laws and regulations that you have to follow, a bunch of which I will be talking about today. Now, you'll notice on all the slides, we have a different 800 number. That is CEA's main number. We do ask that you call the direct hotline number that we provide to you. That's just so we'll know where you're calling from, and that's how we'll answer the phone, that we've got the HR hotline from Monterey County for you. You can also send us an email to ceainfo@employers.org if you have a question. If you think of it in the middle of the night and you just want to send off an email, we will get right back to you the next business day. And also I encourage everyone to visit our website, which is employers.org. We have lots of great information out there for you, our newsletters, our blogs, a lot of other resources that you can access. There are many things on our website that are member-only access, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end if you find you need a little more assistance, but we're happy to provide more info on that if you need it. All right, and my last slide before we jump into it is I want to remind everyone that CEA is not a law firm, so please don't rely upon what I say today as legal advice. We are going to be talking about laws and regulations and assembly bills and all those good things. But when you call CEA, you're not talking to an attorney who is giving you a legal opinion or legal advice. So we always do recommend you consult with counsel anytime you have a matter of legal significance. Alrighty, here's what we're talking about today. We are going to talk about the new pay transparency requirements in California. There are some that every business has to comply with, some that only larger businesses need to follow. A couple of updates regarding cannabis and marijuana in the workplace. We're going to talk about CFRA and a lot of other acronyms, just because if you're not using a lot of acronyms in your HR life, you're not doing it right. So we're going to talk about CFRA, which is California Family Rights Act. We're going to talk about some local updates, some different agencies that are going on and some changes that they're making. And then we're going to look ahead to what's coming in 2024. So let's start out with our pay transparency. So every employer in California is now required to provide pay scale information for any current employee who wants to know how much their specific position pays at your company. And that's going to be that pay range, pay scale. We'll talk about what that means in just a second. So anytime an employee comes in to say to you, can you tell me what the range is for my position? You want to make sure that you're going to be prepared with that information and ready to present it to them. The other thing all employers now need to do in 2023 is maintain good wage records. Now, a lot of you have probably already been doing this, but they've just kind of made it a law. They've made it official that you need to make sure you're doing this for all your employees, that you're maintaining their job title, their wage rate history, and you're maintaining that, of course, the entire time that they're employed with you, but also you want to hold on to those records 3 years post-termination. So make sure you hold on to that. Now, the other change for 15 or more employees is you now need to include pay scale information when you post a job. And I know your first question might be, well, how do I know if I have 15 employees? And I'm going to show you in just a moment here. But keep in mind, anytime we're talking about laws in California, we say if you have 5 or more employees or 15 or more employees, that is your total employee headcount. It doesn't mean it's California specific or site specific. That means all of your employees. Now, all of these regulations have come from something known as the California Equal Pay Act. We have FAQ link on this slide, and that's done by a bit.ly. If you're not familiar with bit.lys, it's just a truncated, a shortened, quick way to get to a specific website. So if you just type in that bit.ly that we've got at the bottom, that'll take you right to some FAQs on this California Pay Act. But let's talk a little more about this and kind of dive into it. So what is a pay scale, and what should that information include? So when it comes to a pay scale, remember we have 2 types of employees in California. We have salary or exempt employees, and then we have non-exempt or hourly employees. So your pay range needs to be the range that you would reasonably expect to pay for a position. So that information does not need to include bonuses or tips or any other benefits that might be part of that total compensation. It really needs to be kind of what is that base range that you would pay for this position. Now, it should at a minimum be the lowest amount that somebody is paid in a position and the highest amount. And I'll show you an example here in just a moment. But you can certainly expand that pay scale beyond those points if you want to. So let's take a look at an example here. We're looking at an HR manager role. So we have 3 people. We have Eric, who's at $64,480, Hannah, who's making $72,500, and Elizabeth, who's making $78,000. So if you're looking at your pay range or your pay scale for this position, it would be $64,480 to $78,000. That is the lowest and the highest that anyone is making. But you can certainly expand that pay scale if you would like to. So maybe you would say an HR manager makes between $64,480 and $85,000, and that could be your pay range. Also, something a lot of employers have been doing now is they've been working on salary banding, as it's known, which means that you put different levels in place. So maybe you would have an HR manager, and then maybe you would have a senior HR manager. So your standard HR manager might make $64,480 to $78,000, but maybe your senior HR manager makes $65,000 to $90,000 or $70,000 to $90,000. So you might have different ranges or different pay bands for different positions. So sometimes employers are looking at, you know what, we have people that have a wide variety of skills and experience. Maybe we need to look at putting them into these different ranges or these different pay bands. And that's certainly something you can do too. Now, for those of you that are CEA members, one of our member benefits is access to our toolkits. And toolkits are really your user-friendly resource guide for any of these topics. And we have a library of toolkits now, but one of them is a pay scales toolkit. So I would encourage you and make sure you log in so you can access that. Go to HR Answers Toolkits, and it really takes you step by step through this whole process. So let's talk about this 15 or more employee requirement. So again, when we're talking about 15 or more employees, remember that is 15 or more employees located anywhere in the universe. So they can be in California, they could be in Nevada, they could be in Oregon. But if you have 15 or more employees, that includes full-time, part-time, exempt, non-exempt, that's a head count that goes towards that number. So if you are at 15 or more employees, you need to make sure you include that pay scale information in the job posting. This also applies if you are using an outside recruiter. So if you use a temp agency and they are posting a job for you, you want to make sure that they are posting that salary range information. And keep in mind that needs to be posted if the job is in California or if somebody who is located in California could do the job. So even if you are based in multiple states, say you're in Arkansas, but you're opening this up, it's a remote job, anyone, anywhere in the US can do it, you would want to make sure you're including that pay scale information if someone from California might apply for that job. So that is a big change for 15 or more. So when it comes to this posting compliance, we get a lot of questions. Well, it's just a minimum wage job. What am I going to say as far as posting? Well, you still want to include a pay scale, and even if it's a minimum wage job, you could have a pay scale of $15.50 to $16.50, for example. But if this position absolutely will only be paid a certain rate, you could certainly say our pay scale is $15.50 to $16.50, and the hiring or starting range is $16 an hour, if you just want to be really clear on how much somebody can expect to make. Now, of course, we want to be compliant with this because, of course, the state is going to assess some fines if we are not. So penalties can be up to $10,000 per violation, which is very expensive for not putting in a salary range. So, of course, we encourage you to do that. The Labor Commissioner, and that's the DLSC, that's the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement in California, they do have this opportunity to cure, or basically a chance to fix your mistake. But they will kind of give you one freebie if you don't do it. But I would just recommend that you don't get on the Labor Commissioner's list of naughty employers in California, and just make sure you're being compliant with this. So when it comes to kind of the 6 steps for how you want to create those compliant pay scales, this is really a great opportunity for you to take a look at what everyone in your company is making. You can put this together in a spreadsheet. If you're using an HRIS system, it can do this for you, but it doesn't have to be fancy or complicated, but you do want to make sure that you're really kind of taking a look and auditing and making sure you are following compliant pay scale practices. So what you can do is you can list all those job positions, take a look at those job descriptions. It's very important to make sure you're updating job descriptions at least once a year as responsibilities and roles changes. Or if you do decide to have a couple of different levels for a particular position, you want to make sure the different job descriptions reflect the responsibility for those particular roles. And then you want to take a look at your payroll records and take a look at your pay scales and find out, where do employees fit within the pay scale? Does it make sense based on their experience, based on their job, based on their education, all those factors that you want to take a look at that are objective and job-based. And then you want to audit and then update those pay scales accordingly. Now, all of those steps are included in our toolkit, and they certainly go into a lot of information, but that's just kind of those 6 steps that you really want to make sure you're following as you look at those pay scales. So how are you going to stay compliant? Well, this is really when it comes to auditing and reviewing your pay scale practices. Make sure that you are being objective and using fact-based decisions when you are making any pay changes. As another reminder, remember, we are not allowed to ask salary history information when you are hiring an employee in California. So if you have that on your application, if you have any questions as part of your interview process regarding salary history, make sure that you remove those, delete them, black them out, do whatever you have to do, but we don't ask questions because we don't want to take information based on what someone used to make. And then we say, oh, well, this position pays $28,000 a year, but they used to make 25. I'm just going to pay them 25. They'll be fine with that. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure we're paying our employees based on what we believe is the appropriate pay scale for that position. And remember, you're going to hold on to those wage records. Again, your HRIS system might do this. Your payroll system might do it. However you're doing it, just make sure you're holding on to those records for 3 years post-termination. Be prepared to provide pay scale information to any employee. Remember, it's just for their position that they currently hold. So they can't say, hey, can you tell me how much this position makes or this position makes? They are only allowed to ask you for how much their specific position is paid. And then again, we've got that toolkit if you find that you need that, because it kind of can be an overwhelming process. So it's good for you to kind of, take it step by step. All right, well, after that big jump into labor law, let's jump into cannabis. Why not? All right, so let me give you a little bit of history on marijuana in California. You probably all remember Prop 64, a lot of questions, a lot of confusion when this first came out, where it legalized recreational marijuana for employees in California, or not, excuse me, not employees, for people in California. Your employees still don't get to be stoned at work. That is not allowed. But there was a little confusion with this because at a federal level, cannabis is still illegal. It's still a Schedule I narcotic in the eyes of the feds. When it came to Prop 64, there really wasn't an impact to the workplace because employees still not allowed to be under the influence of marijuana, even though they could use it recreationally in their own time. But here's the change that's coming for next year that is proposed right now. It's supposed to go into effect. We're not completely convinced it will go into effect because we're hearing they're having some issues, but let me give you a little rundown on it. So as of January 1st, 2024, there will be a new protected class under FEHA. FEHA is the Fair Employment and Housing Act. for individuals who are using cannabis off duty. And what it will say is that employers can't discriminate or take any adverse action against an employee who's using cannabis off the job and away from the workplace. So it still does not permit an employee to possess or be impaired by cannabis on the job. So that's really not a change from that perspective. Where it is going to be a change is how it's going to affect some industries, and then when it comes to testing. So let's talk first about the industries. There are a lot of exceptions to this rule. So if there's employees, or if you are in the building and construction trade, if you are affiliated with doing federal contracts that require federal background checks, investigation, or if you have employees under DOT, this will not apply to them. So they won't fall under this guidelines. They're excluded from it. We're still waiting to get some clarification on specifics for building and construction trade. If you are in that, you know that is a very wide-ranging industry. And so we're trying to get some more specifics on what will really be classified under that, but we're hoping to get those later on this year. But where it is going to be a change for employers is when it comes to testing. And so we've been getting lots of questions. Am I still going to be able to test my employees to find out if they are under the influence of marijuana? So the answer is yes and no. So yes, you will still be able to test your employees for THC, and THC is that compound in marijuana that has that psychoactive effects. And that is what affects your employees' ability to do their job, or when they seem stoned. That's when they're under the influence of THC. And that is only detectable usually within the last few hours. What you will no longer be able to test for are those non-psychoactive metabolites in cannabis, which can be in the body for a couple of weeks. So here's what we're hearing though, is that they don't have the technology to do these tests properly to really be able to find out, is it THC or is it something else? So we're hearing the testing is a little behind. So there is a chance that this is going to get pushed back a little bit, but we'll just have to wait for clarification. So maybe this won't be till 2025, maybe it won't be till 2026, who knows? But what I want you to keep in mind is you can still think of marijuana as the same as alcohol in the workplace. Employees are not allowed to be under the influence of alcohol or marijuana or any other drug if it is impairing their ability to do their job. So this is where we encourage all employers, make sure you have a drug-free workplace policy that also addresses reasonable suspicion testing. You want to make sure you've got that language in your policy, because when you have a policy that says we can test if we reasonably suspect you are under the influence of anything, then you want to make sure you're going to follow along with those guidelines. And of course, you're going to be consistent with that. Number one reason we recommend everybody has a handbook and policies is you want to be consistent, and of course, you want to follow them. So if you don't have an updated handbook that includes that language, or maybe your handbook's a couple years old and you need to update it anyway, I encourage you to visit the CEA store. We have a DIY handbook template. Everything is written for you, including the drug-free workplace policy and reasonable suspicion language. And you can just go in and customize it with your own company info. But this is a great time of the year to make sure you've got a handbook that is up to date, that includes these policies that are going to protect you. All right, so let's talk about CFRA a little bit. So CFRA or CFRA, if you would like to say that, that's fine. People pronounce it differently, but that stands for the California Family Rights Act. And for those of you that are larger employers, you've heard about this for years and years. Those of you that are smaller employers, CFRA has only been applying to smaller employers for the past couple of years. So it's probably something you're still getting used to. So here's a quick overview. So CFRA provides employees with up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave and job protection when they are taking time off for a qualifying reason that I'll show you in just a second. When they're out on leave, those benefits continue. So if they had medical benefits before, those continue at the same level. So you pay your portion as an employer, the employee continues to pay their portion. That 12 weeks is taken within a 12-month period. That can be a calendar year, or you can use a 12-month look-back period for that. You want to make sure you designate that in your handbook policy as well. And the employee is eligible to take CFRA if they have worked for you for 12 months. And in the prior 12 months, they have worked 1,250 hours. So they're going to be a little more than full-time in order to be eligible for CFRA. Now, one thing with CFRA is keep in mind that that runs separately from pregnancy disability leave. Those are two different leaves. But if you are a covered employer, if you have 5 or more employees, you need to make sure you have a policy on CFRA. You've got a poster in your workplace, and you're using all of the appropriate forms. Don't make the mistake of using any federal forms because, of course, they are not compliant in California. So use California specific forms. So when it comes to reasons why someone can take CFRA, they can do that for baby bonding. So that can be for the birth of the child, placement of foster care, or if they adopt a child, that can be used for baby bonding. That's what it's most frequently used for. But it can also be used for the employee's own health condition. And you can run CFRA while an employee is taking time off for a work-related injury. But remember, it doesn't include pregnancy. They can take time off if they are caring for a family member in the armed forces who's on active duty, or caring for a family member with a serious health condition. So that has been CFRA for the past couple of years, but here's the change for 2023. And this applies also to paid sick leave. So CFRA and paid sick leave, an employee can now say, I want to care for a designated person when I am taking paid sick leave or when I am taking CFRA. So at the time an employee requests to utilize paid sick leave or CFRA, they can say, I'm going to care for my designated person. Now, this designated person can be pretty much anyone. Let me give you the quick definitions. CFRA says a designated person is any individual related by blood or whose association with the employee is equivalent to a family relationship. And then paid sick leave is even more general. A designated person is a person identified by the employee at the time the employee requests paid sick leave. So obviously, these are very broad definitions, but the idea behind it is maybe an employee doesn't have family that's nearby, or maybe they just don't have family or a relationship with their family, but they might have somebody who has that hold for them. Maybe that's their roommate that they're very close to. Maybe it's a neighbor that they need to care for. So they can designate that designated person for paid sick leave or CFRA. Now, you as an employer can limit it to one designated person per 12-month period if you would like to do that. But this is a reminder that you're going to need to update your policy to include that CFRA or PSL can include a designated person. And of course, any forms that you have, any request forms, make sure you add that designated person pull out. Now, when we're talking about time off, we also have another one, which is bereavement leave. California now has protected unpaid bereavement leave if you have 5 or more employees. So this will be another policy and form update for you. In order for an employee to be eligible for this, they need to have worked for you for at least 30 days before they're requesting that leave. And the employee must use that leave within 3 months of the date of the death. Now, employees are not required to use that time consecutively. So that means they can break it up. So if somebody in their family passes away and they say, I need to take 2 days off to deal with a couple of immediate issues, but the memorial service isn't going to be until next month. So they can take 2 days now, and then they could take 3 days the following month. You need to allow them to break that time up. Now, you as an employer can request appropriate documentation. That can be an obituary, a death certificate, any sort of notification about the death. Make sure, again, you are consistent with that, and that if you ask one employee to provide that, you ask every employee to provide that. A couple of other things when it comes to bereavement, again, it is unpaid, so it's 5 days of unpaid, but you can certainly have the employee can elect to use vacation, sick, PTO, any other accrued and available time that they already have. Now, you as an employer might also already provide paid leave for bereavement. Oftentimes employers will provide 2 or maybe 3 days of paid bereavement leave. So this is where you're going to need to check your policy, make sure you're very clear on any days that you pay, and then what employees can do for the other days that they might need to take some time off. And of course, I always want to remind everybody, please maintain confidentiality. When an employee is taking time off for bereavement, a lot of times employees will say, hey, where did they go? They haven't been here for a couple of days. And you might say, out of the goodness of your heart, oh, they had a family member pass away or their father passed away. We just want to make sure that we never disclose any information really about any leave time, if it's pregnancy related or bereavement. If the employee says it's okay to disclose that information, that's perfectly fine. You can disclose it, but we just don't advise that you disclose any personal information without that employee's consent. Now, when it comes to who is a covered family member, that's a spouse, registered domestic partner, child, parent, parent-in-law, sibling, grandparent, and grandchild. So that is the covered family members there. And no, designated person is not currently covered under bereavement leave. We're not sure why they didn't put it in since they made that change for CFRA and PSL, but it is quite possible that they will make that change in future years, but it is not there yet. The other thing to remember with this law is this leave is per death and not per year. So you can't limit them to 5 days per year. If somebody passes away in February and the employee needs to attend a funeral, someone else passes away in October, they would have another 5 days. Hopefully no one has to deal with multiple deaths in a year, but that can certainly happen. We had a question come in, can an employee take bereavement leave for their pets? That would not be a covered reason, but you could certainly allow them to utilize any other accrued and available time off that they have, vacation, PSL, PTO, whatever your policy allows for. All right, so a couple of key takeaways. So you definitely have some policy updates with all this info. So paid sick leave and CFRA policy, make sure you update those to include designated person. You're going to update or add your information to the bereavement leave. Make sure it says that they get 5 days of unpaid. And if you pay a day or 2 or 3, make sure you stipulate that in your policy as well, so it's very clear. When it comes to other updates, update those forms. If you have a PSL request or just a time off request form, make sure that you add designated person to that PSL. And then of course, any of your CFRA forms will now need to reflect that they can take time for a designated person. And of course, make sure your posters are updated. If you do not have a 2023 poster up in your office, it is time. So make sure you order one. You can order one from our CEA store, or you can get one on your own. However you do it, just please put one up, because if someone comes in, OSHA or other state agencies come in to audit you and you don't have your poster up, they are going to be more than happy to slap you with a minimum $7,000 to $10,000 fine. So you want to make sure you're really being compliant with that. Now, we do have another bit.ly down here for you. That's our all-in-one labor law poster. We have it in English and Spanish if you need it. You can get it for other states as well. So feel free, take a look at that bit.ly, and definitely make sure you get your handbook updated. If your handbook has not been updated for 2023, then I promise you, you are out of date, because there were a lot of changes that went into effect in January. So make sure you are staying up to date with that. All righty, let's start talking about some agency and local ordinance updates that you need to keep in mind. Now, I wish I could tell you that I had nothing to report on COVID, because I know we are all done with COVID, but a couple of reminders that I do want to tell you about COVID. So there have been lots of changes. I know everyone was trying to keep up with them. They were so exhausting, but we are holding steady now when it comes to COVID, and we have this new permanent standard under Cal OSHA. So I'm sure everybody kind of remembers a lot of acronyms when it came to OSHA and COVID. There was something called the ETS. Those were the emergency temporary standards. So now we have stabilized, and we have these standards that are in place through February of 2025, and there are some record keeping requirements that will go through 2026. But here are the standards that everyone needs to remember. You still need to have a COVID prevention program, or a CPP as it's known. That can be part of your IIPP, which is your injury illness prevention program, but we recommend you do it as a standalone document, as these things still keep changing, even though they're going to be the same for a couple of years as of right now. We just think it's easier to keep it as a separate document, but that's where you can address any testing requirements, any of those precautions that you would take during an outbreak, et cetera. Those are still in place. But the great news is there are no daily screening requirements anymore. Exclusion pay exhausted in California. There is no longer supplemental paid sick leave. All of those things have gone away. Now we have a really nice fact sheet on this. That's the bit.ly for you on the bottom of slide 31. I definitely recommend you take a look at that just as a little refresher. I know things have kind of softened and lightened up quite a bit when it comes to COVID in the workplace, but you still want to make sure you're following along and being compliant. So here are the current guidelines when it comes to isolation or quarantine. So if an employee says to you, I have COVID-19, they are still supposed to stay home for 5 days. They can end that isolation after 5 days as long as they feel well and have improving symptoms and they are fever-free for 24 hours. No negative testing is required anymore in California. So you don't have to worry about getting a copy of the test screen, the screenshot with their phone, any of those things. Just after 5 days, an employee can come back. You've probably noticed if you have gone to the doctor or the dentist lately that you no longer have to wear masks in those settings, which is a nice change as well. And the CDPH, that is the California Department of Public Health, they ended all vaccination requirements for healthcare workers, anybody that was in adult care, correctional facilities, all of those vaccination requirements have ended. Now, there are still a couple of exceptions, and that's why I'd encourage you to take a look at the guidelines. There can be masking requirements after close contact, during outbreaks, some local ordinances, so check on that. It's interesting how some cities have not updated. For example, specifically the city of Oakland, they are still under a state of emergency. They have not changed that, even though the state has done away with the state of emergency several months ago. So every now and then you'll just hear about a city or a jurisdiction that's kind of doing their own thing. So you never know. Another change that they are talking about is this indoor heat illness standard. Now, again, this is not official yet, and this has been kind of kicked around for several years, actually since 2017. They've been proposing these indoor standards, but this is not official yet. But what they're talking about is any location where there might be partial structures, open spaces, warehouses, for example, construction areas. They might have some indoor heat illness requirements. And these would kick in anytime the temperature exceeds 82 degrees. And then 87 degrees, there would have to be cool down areas, water breaks, etc. So stay tuned for this one. It has gone back to committee and then put on hold and then back to another committee. So it's really tossed around a lot. But this is why I would encourage you to join us for our labor law update at the end of the year. In December, we will always have, or December, January, we always have kind of the 2024 update, and we'll see if there's been any traction on this because Cal OSHA has been pretty up and down about it. All right, another thing that we always want you to keep in mind are local minimum wages constantly changing. There are over 40 different local ordinances that have different minimum wage requirements in California. And what you have to remember is you want to make sure you know where your employees are physically working. I know you might have some remote employees, you might have some employees that work here one day, work somewhere else another day, but you want to make sure that you're always following that local minimum wage for the employees where they're physically working. Even if you've got a corporate or a main office in one city that just has the state minimum wage, if somebody's working in one of these 40 different jurisdictions, you need to make sure they're making the minimum wage that's required there. So here are a couple of changes that we've had recently. Now, I used to be able to say that minimum wages only went into effect in January, and then a couple of cities started to get fancy and they started to put effects or changes into effect in July. And then out of nowhere, San Mateo came in with the April 1st. They caught us all off guard. But here are just kind of a sample of some of the minimum wages, especially in your area, that you want to keep in mind. So as of July 1st, Alameda, Berkeley, Fremont, those are all going up. San Francisco, of course, they always lead the pack in higher wages. But then if you have operations or employees down in Southern California, be aware of LA, city and county. They have some of their own rules. North Hollywood is also increasing their minimum wage quite a bit. So you just want to make sure you're really taking a look at where your employees working. Now, there's another bit.ly for you here on slide 35. Take a look at that. Make sure you put that in and just double check where all of your employees are working for paid sick leave as well as minimum wage. Now, another thing you might have heard about are these local work week ordinances or fair work week ordinances, as they're sometimes known, specifically LA, Berkeley, San Francisco, Emeryville. They're trying to really help manage scheduling issues, especially for larger businesses. And what they are looking for are really requiring employees' work schedules in advance so employees can plan appropriately. They're also talking about predictability pay. If there's changes to the schedule without proper notice, there's record keeping requirements. This all kind of started with a big case. It was actually a store, a retail store that kept canceling on people right before they were supposed to come into work, and people had to hold their day and kind of turned into a big mess. So that's why we're looking at these fair work week ordinances. So go ahead and check again for any cities where you operate in to see if you need to follow that to make sure that you're being compliant. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, there's been a lot of confusion when it comes to I-9s. Now, remember, an I-9 is required for any employee who is working for you. Section 1 has to be filled out on the employee's first day. Section 2 has to be filled out within 3 business days, where you take a look at all of those documents to ensure of their right to work and verify their identity. When it comes to remote I-9s, there's been a lot of confusion. I will say it seems sometimes the government, if you can imagine, has not been very clear on this, but they have clarified what the requirements are now. What they have been saying for a long time is that if your workplace was fully remote, there was nobody working in an office, everybody was working from home, they were allowing employers to really just look at employees' documents via Zoom or via some electronic form. So they would say, okay, can you show me your driver's license? And the employee would just hold up their driver's license to the camera. They would take a look to verify it. And then they would say, okay, great. Well, then everybody started coming back to the office and people forgot that they were supposed to keep verifying or verify those documents in person. So here are the rules. If you only verified any documents via virtual when people were remote and you are back in the office and you have not taken a look at those documents, you want to do that on your immediate to-do list. Make sure you do that immediately. If you are still fully remote and nobody is in an office, you now have until July, or I guess it's really August 30th, to physically examine documents and update any I-9 forms that need updating. So even if you're fully remote, that means you need to send a designated representative, a third-party representative from your company to go verify those documents. So if you still have people scattered and you're fully remote, by August 31st, make sure you do verify all of those documents and somebody on behalf of the company looks at those documents and verifies them. But if you are back in the office, even if you still have people that are remote, but if you have an office, you need to make sure you verify any documents that were only verified virtually before. All right, the other change with the I-9, if you were to look at the current I-9 form, you would say, oh no, I'm using an expired I-9 form because it expired last October. But no, you are not, because they still have not updated the form. In March, they said there's going to be a new form sometime this year. We can't wait. So hopefully there will be a new I-9 coming very soon. That's another great reason for you to make sure you're on our email list and you are getting our newsletters, because of course we will update you and we will send you a link when that new form is available. They're talking about a lot of changes to the form. They want to make it less complicated, which would be great. They're trying to clean up some areas. If you've ever had to fill those out, you know, there's information at the very top of page 2 that people skip all the time that is required to be filled out. We heard they're trying to streamline it, maybe even making it a one-page form, which would be great. Probably removing part of that recertification information, which is so seldom used. So there are going to be some nice changes. There will be a change allegedly to gender identity, that an individual can put a different gender than what is on their paperwork. So we will see when that is all finalized, when we do get that new form, but keep an eye out for that. We're expecting that sometime soon, we think. All right, so let's talk about looking ahead to 2024 and how we are supposed to manage all these things and get through the rest of this year here. So I know you probably hear about it all the time in the news, certainly being Central Coast, Bay Area, Northern California. I think we hear about it more than a lot of other places in the state. But there have been all sorts of layoffs that people have had to deal with, changes in workforce dynamics. There's been the, okay, everybody go remote. Okay, you come back. Okay, you come back 2 days a week. No, everybody come back. And then nobody has to come back. There's been a lot of up and down. And when you hear about it with big companies, especially, you know, Amazon and Zoom has been affected, Meta, of course, there's been all sorts of changes. So employees hear that, and that's kind of disconcerting for them too, because they're trying to figure out what's going on. Unemployment, you know, we hear the numbers are really low, but we know how hard it is to find employees. A lot of people have not come back to the workplace, or a lot of people have just left California. You know, we've had a lot of changes to our population, and it's all those things. What in the world are we trying to do to get through this? But what I would encourage all of you, and this is why it's a great idea, to make sure your handbook is up to date, make sure your policies are solid, make sure you have a good management team in place so that you can keep those good employees and we can keep working on making sure we have a healthy work environment, because that's going to help keep your employees, because employees like to work in a good place. That's the big, when they talked about that resignation tsunami, if you've listened to us before, we've talked about that. That's because people just thought, I don't have to work at this lousy place anymore. I'm going to leave, or I'm leaving the state, or I'm just looking for a change. I want to try something else. But if we can kind of work with our employees and figure out what is that good balance, what they need to be a good performer and still help the company, that's what we want to look for. And as we all know, remote work has changed a lot. So as of right now, about 35% of workers work 100% remotely. And then we've got about 41% of workers that are working some sort of hybrid schedule. So maybe they're in the office 1 or 2 days a week, and then they're working from home the other days. Now, we know that may not work for everybody. Certainly some industries and some positions, everybody has to be there every day, and that is perfectly fine too. But what we're just kind of recommending for employers, if you have an employee who says, I'd really like to work from home 1 day a week, and that's something that you can do for your business, take a look at it. Maybe do it as a pilot program, see if it works. But that means we still hold all of our employees to the same standards. They have the same requirements. They have the same time card responsibilities as far as if they're an hourly employee clocking in and out, making sure they get their breaks and their meal periods. So everything still applies, but we just might need to take a look at being a little more flexible, because if it's a difference between losing a good employee because they can go somewhere that's offering the hybrid option or not, you might want to take a look at considering some of those hybrid options. But again, you have to figure out what works best for your business and what you really need to run your business. All right, the other thing that we've been getting lots of questions on is ChatGPT, and how in the world am I going to manage this with my workforce, especially for those of you that might have some HR functions as one of the many hats that you wear. We get lots of questions about, can I write a policy with ChatGPT? Can I write up an employee in ChatGPT? And there is some potential disruption. We are seeing more changes or more things generated by ChatGPT. Just the other day, I was on Instagram, and there is this account where it's like advice by AI. And it's this older looking man. It is a pretend man because he is AI generated, but just giving out life advice. And he's got the mustache, and it looks like he's got a pipe, and it's just supposed to be your grandpa that you're talking to. But a lot of employers are wondering, how is this going to affect the workplace? And really what we're recommending is that you want to kind of do baby steps into ChatGPT and into any sort of AI. You can certainly incorporate it into your workforce and into your workforce process as far as writing policies, anything like that. But really what you want to take a look at is maybe that's your first draft. So maybe you are trying to put together a policy, or you're trying to put together a new procedure, a new way to do things. And you can have ChatGPT help you on that initial draft. But if you've read ChatGPT things, it's not always very human-like. Of course, it's going to improve and there will be changes, but maybe it can make your life a little easier. But you want to really take a look at, what are the advantages for your business? How could this not be good for your business? You also want to take a look at who's allowed to use ChatGPT. If you have employees who are generating articles for you, press releases, anything like that, you want to make sure you've got some control and clarification on who's writing what. You can decide if you want to have a policy around AI or ChatGPT. If you have seen our sample employee handbook, we certainly have a policy on the use of electronic devices and media and social media, those kind of things. We will certainly be incorporating AI into it for our next update. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that ChatGPT, there have been a lot of changes, but a lot of it is outdated. So if you were to go in and say, create a policy for CFRA for an employer that has 10 or more employees, it might not include all of those components. Sometimes it hasn't been updated with the changes that I talked about, designated person, for example, or they added parent-in-law as a covered reason to take CFRA in 2022. So you might not get everything you need. So just keep in mind, it can give you some good things, but it may not provide the best things for you as well. And Anna, thank you so much. Just posted that we have a ChatGPT webinar coming up in August. So we encourage you to join us for that. It will be fascinating to see what happens there. All right, so a couple of bills just to keep an eye on for our last couple of slides here. They have talked about expanding paid sick leave from 3 days to 5 days. They have been talking about this for a couple of years. or excuse me, 7 days. They're talking from 3 years to 7 days. I think it might go down to 5 days or up to 5 days. 7 days seems like a lot to me, but we will see what they decide to do. That has gone back to committee, passed one committee and then went back for revisions. Family caregiver as a FEHA protected classification. Someone, if this passes, would be able to ask for a reasonable accommodation to care for someone in their family. They would, of course, designate in the bill who would be a covered family member for that, I expect. They're also talking about a healthcare minimum wage going up to $25 an hour. We'll see if that goes through. That one has been passed around quite a bit. Kind of came about during COVID and it never got passed. So we'll see if it does get passed in the next couple of years here. We'll just have to hold on and see for that one. The other thing to keep in mind and something to be aware of, and this is a change that we've also made to our handbook, is having a workplace violence policy. Currently, right now, only the healthcare industry has some of those specific requirements. Cal OSHA has released a draft kind of for general workplace violence provisions. We're expecting to get some more clarification on that, but that is something to certainly consider if you don't have it as a policy. Again, we've got a policy in our handbook that you can take advantage of, but we do think there will probably be some general industry guidelines that come out from Cal OSHA, hopefully by the end of the year. But again, we'll give you an update on that for our 2024 labor law update. And then just a couple of things to talk about here, as we talked about kind of ChatGPT and AI coming into the workplace and all of the things that we've been having to worry about and think about as employees and business owners and leaders, is there has really been an emphasis and a little more attention placed on bringing that humanity back to the workplace. And there's a couple of different ideas we just wanted to throw out to everybody. Recognition programs can be a great way to really just establish a little more of a personal relationship with your employees. You can offer them any sort of personal, professional development. Even if you're able to offer $100 or $200 towards a class that they might want to take, even if it's just a hobby, or maybe it could be for counseling, anything like that. Also, check with your medical programs to see if they have any EAP provisions. A lot of times those are part of your medical plan and employees just don't know about it, or it hasn't really kind of been advertised. So that might be a good option. Anytime you can celebrate those milestones, if it's anniversaries, that's a great thing. Celebrating people's birthdays. Of course, we always recommend that you check in with the employee to make sure it's okay to celebrate. But even if you just did a quarterly, bring in a cake for everybody who has a birthday during that quarter and just kind of celebrate and have something fun. Empathy. We always say being an empathetic leader is one of the best skills that you can have. Everybody has craziness in their life. There's a lot going on. We want to make sure we're trying to understand what our employees are going through and empathize with them and let them know that we understand that we can find that balance between work and whatever they're dealing with. And of course, anytime you can have a sense of humor, that is a great thing in today's world, because we know how crazy life has been and everything going on in the news. It's a lot sometimes, and especially during the summertime when your employees have kids out of school and there's kind of a whole other level that they're working on managing. So anything you can think of, those little things, bringing in bagels, bringing in cake, bringing in pizza day, can really just make employees feel great about work and make them feel a little bit better about trying to find that balance. So a couple of quick suggestions on how to make work more human. We want to make sure we're thanking our employees. This does not have to be a giant thing. This can be a quick email. Hey, thanks so much for getting that report to me a couple of hours early. It really helped me have time to process it. It can be something as simple as having more team huddles. If you just want to have a really quick once a week team huddle, it's something CEA does. We have a half-hour meeting every Monday morning where we just talk about what's going on, anything everybody needs to know. You really only speak up if you have something to share. So it's a quick, get everything out there for the whole week, and then everyone can continue on with their day. But sometimes it really can help people understand what's going on in the company. And it doesn't have to be super fancy over Zoom or anything like that. It could just be a group meeting in the office, team huddle, whatever is appropriate for your workplace, but just to keep that communication going. Also remind them about any perks that they might have as employees. Can remind them, make sure you take your vacation time, or did you know our medical plan has an EAP? And just kind of remind them about things, that resources they may not be using that maybe they need. And of course, celebrate. We want to make sure that we celebrate with our employees. And if it's that bringing in pizza, I always say hold the power of a $5 Starbucks gift card, because if you can give someone just a little treat, a little perk and say, hey, thanks for your work on that, or you did a great job putting together that presentation, go grab a drink on your next break, my treat, it can just go a long way and it does not cost a lot of money. So it's a good thing to take a look at. And obviously there's lots of benefits. You've got better retention, better recruitment. You know, people might say, hey, I work at a great company. I know somebody who's looking for work. I'm going to have them interview with us. It's a really good way. Referral programs can be a great incentive for your employees. It just improves a lot of things, efficiency, performance. People start talking more, ideas start coming out. Even if there's a little bit of conflict, remember conflict can be healthy when we're having professional, proactive discussions. Maybe it's just ideas about what can we change in this process? What can we do better? How can we meet our customer needs? Just throw out those ideas, see what comes back. It might be surprising that you can find out some pretty great things. And of course, it can always help profits. We like when our profits are up. So anything we can do to encourage that healthy environment can make a big difference. And of course, it can help people talk up or speak up about things that maybe they're concerned about. Maybe there's a safety in the workplace issue. Maybe they're concerned about harassment or discrimination. And if you can get people talking so you can deal about those issues before they become a bigger issue, that's just really, really good for the workplace. So we certainly encourage that. All right, a couple of final reminders for you, and then I'll jump. I know we've got a couple of questions. Go ahead, if you have any other questions, throw them into the Q&A box and we will get to those here. But your final reminders, make sure you are developing those pay scales, make sure you're holding on to job titles, wage rates, and you're retaining that information for at least 3 years post-termination. Remember, in general, all documentation related to your employee, a good rule of thumb is hold on to it for 4 years. That includes time cards, personnel files, wage records. 4 years is a good guideline to keep in mind. Review your drug and alcohol policy. Highly encourage you to have a reasonable suspicion provision within that policy. Make sure your CFRA forms are updated, your policy is updated. We're going to include designated person. Make sure you have parent-in-law, all the other little changes that I talked about for the past few years. Take a look at your bereavement leave policy. Make sure it's compliant. Talk about the 5 days of unpaid leave per death. And then you can talk about any other paid time that you might provide to them. Always check those local minimum wage ordinances because, boy, they're sneaky and they keep changing them at different times of the year. So you've got to stay up to date. Just make sure any city that you have employees working in, you know what they need to be paid. And remember, our I-9 remote flexibilities are expiring. So more things from COVID that we're very happy to get rid of. All right, and as I mentioned before, we've got our CEA membership plans here for you. If you're just looking for a monthly membership, we have a great option for you. You can pay month to month and have full access to everything on our website. If you might need a little more assistance, we've got our Premier membership. And then if you need extra assistance, we have our Ultimate membership. So I'm going to bring up our code slide. If you need SHRM or HR credit slides, and Anna, I'm sorry, if you are able to pop those into the chat box. Zoom is not letting me exit out to get those codes, but I wanted to get to a couple of questions that I saw that came over here. We had a question come in about posters. So if you have multiple locations and if you have employees kind of scattered, we always get this question, what do I do about posters? So the guideline is, thank you so much, Anna. Let me give everybody those codes really quick and I'll get right back to posters. So HRCI, it is 632734 and your SHRM code is 23-MAPFR. Why did I make that complicated? Okay. So HRCI 632734, SHRM 23-M as in Mary, A as in Anna, P as in Paul, F as in Frank, R as in Roger. All right, so make sure you get those codes. So back to posters. If your employees at any time during the year might come into the office and be able to see the poster, fantastic. You do not need to provide any posters to them. If they are fully remote and will not come into your office, yes, you do need to make sure that you are providing posters to them. So you can just send them a poster. They can slap it on the back of their office door, have it in their closet, whatever it is. But yes, you do want to make sure if they never come into the office, you do provide them with a copy of that poster. The other thing to keep in mind, CEA does have a poster program where we will send them out to your employees and we can send them updates as they come out because there have been poster updates. So make sure that you are doing that as well. All right, I think I am all caught up with that. Yes, I think we're all caught up. Fantastic. So I just want to thank everyone so much for coming today. I'm going to turn it back over to Anna to wrap it up. And I will be coming to speak at the September meeting. So I hope to see you all there. I will look forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Yeah, just one final thank you again for all of you for joining us today, and especially to Jerry and the Monterey County Workforce Development Board for sponsoring this for you all. Really hope you found this presentation valuable. We can't stress it enough. If you can take the 1 or 2 minutes to fill out the survey at the link, you'll find it either in your presentation handbook or right here on the screen. That just helps us continue to improve our presentations and really take your feedback to heart. So to find out about future webinars, forums, please visit our website at employers.org and definitely reach out to Monterey County to see what other resources are available to you. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.